Hi Theory 3, this is lesson 20, and we are reviewing the major scale this week, okay? So, quick review. Remember that the major scale, this isn't on your worksheet for this week, you should know this already, but the major scale starts, the first note that we start on is what we call tonic, right? So the very first note of the scale is called tonic. Then we go up a whole step. Okay, what is a whole step? Well, it might be easier to start with what is a half step. A half step is where our fingers, it's the very next pitch that we can play on our fingerboard, or the very next, when our fingers are close together. A whole step is two half steps put together, okay? So that means that there's space between our fingers. It could still be 1 and 2, but there's space. Half step, fingers close. Whole step, fingers farther apart. It also could be different fingers. So 2 to 3, or if we did 2 to low 4, that's a whole step if 3 is in the middle, okay? A whole step if the fourth finger is really close. So on our fingerboard, on our tapes, if you remember when you had tapes, okay, 1 to 2 is a whole step. You can fit a finger in between there. 2 to 3, half step. 3 to 4, whole step. You can fit a finger. And even open to first finger is a whole step. Okay, so you can see fingers far apart, whole step. Fingers close together, half step. Okay, so in our scale pattern, we have our tonic note, and then we go up a whole step. We worked hard when we worked hard. So there's the pattern, WWH, WWH with a W in the middle. Or we worked hard when we worked hard, okay? So today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of build on that. You already know that, right? Okay, so what I did this week is we're going to start with the key of C, okay? Actually, I don't want to do your work for you. Let's start with the key of D, okay? So key of D for violin, viola, we'll go down here, key of D. Okay, so I gave you the key signature already. I already showed you basically where the half steps and whole steps are. So you don't have to find them because you know that you already have F sharps and C sharps. So D, E, F, it's really, I'm going to put a little bracket. We call that a courtesy accidental, if it looked like one. Okay, F sharp, G, A, B, reminder, C sharp, D. Okay? Violas. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Okay? I don't really need these sharps because they're in the key signature, but just so that you see it, okay? So, we know that it goes, first note is tonic, right? So here's tonic, and then this is a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's my pattern. So the first thing that I'm asking you to do is underneath, I want you to write each note. D, you'll see 1 period, it's under the note. Write the letters under each note is what the first instruction says. And then mark the half step with a slur. So you've got these lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mine aren't lining up quite on my board here, but they do on your sheet. Okay, D, E, F sharp, write the letters in, G, A, B. If it is a sharp, check your key signature, D. Okay? Now, I marked in the whole steps and half steps. All you have to do is say, okay, I know that it goes whole, half. So here's the half step. Just slur those two together. You can either do a slur, or if you would rather, you can do like an upside down V. Okay? So that it's kind of, I like the V better than a slur, but I didn't know how to say draw half of a triangle. Like that doesn't make sense. So this is kind of, if you did this, people would know that you're meaning a half step. Okay? So draw a half step with an upside down V between the notes. Okay? That are a half step. So you should have a half step here and there, because that's where whole, half between these two notes, whole, half between these two notes. Okay? So you write in the letters, then mark the half steps with an upside down V or like a tent. Okay? Tent shape. Then question number 2 says, what is the tonic for that scale, the C scale? What's the tonic of my scale here? What's the first note? It's like the easiest question ever, right? I kind of tell you. So it's D. Tonic is D. Now, the 4th note of a scale is called, any note that's in the position of the 4th note is called the subdominant. You see that at the top of your page. Subdominant. So what is the subdominant for the key of D? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's G. Okay, so on number 3, where it says what's the subdominant? For the key of G, or for the key of D, I'm going to say G. Now for the key of C, it's not G. You have to look up there and look at note 4 and decide, say what note that is. That's the subdominant. Okay, now the subdominant is always note 4. It's not always G. It's not always C. It's not always F. That note changes just like the tonic note changes. Okay? Tonic is always note 1. Subdominant is always note 4. And then different letters fill in those spots depending on what key we're playing in. Now, dominant. Dominant is note 5. So you count in your scale. For example, in my D scale, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, looks like H, but it's A. Okay? The dominant is A. And you're like, why do they give them special names? You'll find out. But you need to know these special names. For now, you just have to learn that note 4 is subdominant. Note 5 is dominant. Okay? Then number 5, the half steps are between notes what and what. I'm looking for letters there. Okay? What letters are the half steps in the C scale? Between this and this, and then between notes blank and blank, because there's 2 half steps. So what notes is the half step between? They are the blank and blank note in the scale. What number? I'm looking for the number of note they are. They are the 3rd and 4th notes in the scale. That's the first half step, is always the 3rd and 4th note, and the 7th and 8th note. I just told you the answer. Okay? They are always the 3rd and the 4th note, and the 7th and the 8th note. Okay? If you ever say, oh, the half step is between the 4th and the 5th note, that is wrong. Okay? The half step is always, because our pattern doesn't change. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Okay? So what I'm wanting you to do is apply this to different scales and know what it means happens to that scale. Okay? So some of these questions today, you'll be like, well, I already answered that. Well, that was for the C scale. Now you have to answer it for the G scale. So on the first page, I want you to do C scale, answer those questions. Then I ask you the very same questions about the G scale. some of the answers stay the same. Like what number on the scale are the half steps between? The letters change, but the numbers always stay the same. It's always between the third and fourth, seventh and eighth. But the third and fourth note in the G scale is different than the C scale. What are those letters in the G scale? Okay? And don't forget that if you get here and something has to do with F sharp, or up here it's yep, you don't have to do that. There's no sharps up here. Down here. If there's anything where you have to write an F sharp, you can't just write F, because all of the sharps are F. Okay? F sharp. Okay, so that's the first page. I hope that is, as I tell my little students, clear as mud. Okay, second page. Draw the bar lines. This goes back to all the counting that we've been doing recently. Okay? Where do the bar lines go? And then at the end, draw a double bar line, because it's the end of the line. Okay? Notice that the time signatures are different on each line. So don't treat each line as 4-4. Okay? Then a dot beside a note tells you to do a math problem. Okay? It can go beside any note value. We can put a dot beside any note value. The dot tells you, if you see a dot next to a half note, says take whatever note, what that note is worth, so 2 beats, divide it in half. So let's cut it in half. So 2 divided in half equals 1, right? So the dot gets 1 beat, because it's half of whatever this is. And then you add it into that one. So that means it equals 3. Okay? So the dot doesn't always say add 1. It says add half of whatever this is. Okay? So it's a little bit like doing some algebra, huh? Oh, that math word again. Okay. Dotted quarter note. 1. So what's half of 1? Half. So the dot means add this to here. So you get 1.5. Okay. What about a dotted whole note? How many does this one get? What's half of 4? The dot means add 2. So a dotted whole note gets 6 beats. Okay, now you're like, Miss Kristen, I knew all that already. Okay, smarty pants. What about 2 dots? What do you do if you see 2 dots? We call this double dotted. Okay? It's not just to make it look fancy. It's not just a mistake. It's actually a rhythmic value. Okay, so 2. The dot says half of the note. So you say this gets 1, right? Now this dot says half of the dot. So now you add all of these together, and a double dotted half note gets 3.5. Okay, so that would also be like, here's 3, we know. Okay, we know that's 3. What's half a beat? So it would be like, these are the same. Okay, 3.5. This is tied, 3.5. Sorry. Okay, so the second dot means half of the first dot, whatever the first dot was worth. So at the bottom of your page, I ask you, what's a double dotted eighth note? Okay, so now you're having to do some fractions. So an eighth note, it gets half of a beat. What's half of a half? And then what's half of a half of a half? Okay, so if you need to pencil it in, that's fine. See if you can figure out how much of one beat a double dotted eighth note would get, or how much of a beat. I did the middle one for you. Okay, double dotted half note and then a double dotted whole note. How much does that get? Okay. Is that all I have for you this week? Yes, that's it. No theory next week. It's spring break, and I will see you guys following that. A quick side note is that last week we talked about you did some worksheets with the rhythm of Scott Joplin from his School of Ragtime and his use of syncopation, where he made weak beats feel strong. He gave emphasis to the weak beat. This weekend, the symphony is doing a concert, the music of Scott Joplin. You can get a Zoom code to watch it. It's $20 per house, and as many people as you want in your house can watch it. You can sit in your pajamas or your sweatshirt. You don't have to dress up. You can make popcorn and get a Coke and sit in your comfortable couch and watch the symphony this weekend as they play the music of Scott Joplin and lots of ragtime. So Scott Joplin was from Texarkana, just right up the road, and ragtime is kind of the foundation of where jazz came from. So ragtime took rhythms from African American music, the music that they passed down orally and that they sang, and also that they played a lot of their banjo music here in the South, the rhythms that they used in that. Then they had a special dance step that they did. It was called the cakewalk. He took the rhythms from the cakewalk and the banjo music, and then he studied classical music in a college, and he put the two together, and what came out was ragtime. So it has these melody lines, kind of like classical music, but it has bass lines that are from the African American heritage music that was here in the South. So this is truly an American genre from America. This doesn't have its roots in Europe at all. And then from that was the early 1900s. And from that, we launch into jazz. And New Orleans is kind of like, the place that you go to hear jazz. So Louisiana here we have that ragtime and jazz. So if you want to learn a little bit about your musical heritage from this state and hear some of what was happening in the early 1900s musically, even here, you can tune in this weekend to listen to that. Scott Joplin wrote that ice cream truck song that we all hear, da 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 dum ba dum ba dum ba da da da. The Entertainer, he wrote that one. His very famous piece, The Maple Leaf Rag, lots and lots of ragtime. I think you guys would enjoy it. It's a really fun concert, fun music, makes you smile. It's just happy music. I think you would really like it. So get your Zoom code this weekend, and I think you'll enjoy it. Have a great week. Have a great spring break, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.